So today we're talking about healthy boundaries and walls and inner peace. One of the weird things about this talk is, I've talked a lot about boundaries, healthy boundaries over the years. But for some reason, when this talk came to me to create this live event, I was supposed to include healthy walls, which seems really odd, right? Normally, we're talking about how to tear down the walls and just create boundaries, or how to, take down the walls around our heart and all these kind of things. And for some reason, we were supposed to include healthy boundaries and healthy walls in our talk today, which is fascinating to me. So why? Why are we talking about this today? One of the big things that is really important right now is we're all transitioning from one way of connecting with people to another. And in the old world paradigm that we all grew up in, connection was not easy. Every so often you find somebody, or you find a family, or you find people who actually were truly loving and truly respectful and truly kind to each other. But these people have been quite the exception to the rule. With people like that, in those situations, you don't even need boundaries and walls. They're not necessary, because every single person is honored for who they are. As that person presents who they are, you read it, you go, excellent. We don't judge an introvert for being introverted or an extrovert for being extroverted. We don't pry into people's private lives. We don't try to control other people. So we don't need boundaries and walls, because everybody understands personal sovereignty, personal space, personal path, that we each have our own path to take. So this isn't necessary for that. But for the other, 90%, 95% of our interactions in the world, boundaries and walls are important. And the beautiful thing is, for me, what I see in the world is that we're transitioning to a space where this kind of beautiful respect and this open-hearted connection is actually possible. That's what I see that's coming. That's what I see that's expanding in all of us. Whether it's just these tiny things we're healing, which grow into bigger things and bigger things and bigger things. But we're all moving towards that desire that, no, I really actually want to connect with people on a heart-to-heart level. I want to be able to open myself and share and be there and connect, whether it's in friendship, whether it's in the community, whether it's with work, whether it's in intimacy, whether it's with our children. I want a deeper connection. So what that means for us to get there, the first thing we have to do is actually recognize where we are right now. We have to recognize the relationships we have right now, because that old paradigm has formed how we think connections are, how we think friendship really is, how we think intimacy is, even how we think sex is, how we think raising children is. And so we have to really become conscious of the training that we've had up until this point. And this is and in this in-between space, in this in-between world space, the discussion of boundaries and walls is really important. So the majority of this talk is actually about navigating that old world paradigm of control, of people encroaching on our beings, of disconnection, of all those kind of things. But it's just really to have an awareness. It's just about understanding that this is where I've come from, and I am going to grow into a place where it's effortless to be loving. It's effortless to be kind. It's effortless to open my heart to others. But first, we really have to look in the skeletons in the closet. We have to look at what we've shoved under the rug collectively as a culture, as a world. Because this exists in all cultures. It's permeated into all the corners of the world. And I believe it's changing. But we need to look at it in the meantime, while we're still interacting with those in the old paradigm. So there's 3 big things that we want to look at in this sort of, I'm just going to keep calling it the old world and new world, and without any other attachments to what that means. Let's just say where we've come from and where we're going. And I'm going to call it the old world and the new world. So in the old world, control was a huge player. We tried to control each other. Big deal. Even controlling self, but we're not going to go there today. We're not going to go into how this applies to ourselves. I don't think we are, but that's not part of the plan. The second part, which goes along with control, is disconnection. We actually assume that we're going to stay emotionally disconnected to each other. Because why would we ever control someone who we were emotionally connected to? We would never want to feel the pain of being controlled. So we stay disconnected. And the third big aspect of this old paradigm is that we actually treat each other like objects. And it's not just sex objects and things like that. We actually don't treat other people like humans. We treat children like blobs of clay that we must mold into model citizens. We treat our partner like some kind of weird blown up sex doll that's supposed to act a certain way. And I don't mean just about sex. I mean, they're supposed to do this, and they're supposed to do this, and they're supposed to look a certain way. They're supposed to act a certain way. And we've forgotten that this is actually a human being. This is a divine incarnation of God in physical form. Why do we have expectations of them? Of course, a lot of this comes from the past when we had no choice. We couldn't leave. Divorce was not allowed. Economically, we couldn't leave. So we kind of, there was no connection. So we just became objects in each other's worlds, right? But that's in the past. We're not in that space anymore. We don't have to treat each other as objects to simply survive. We have the option. But this mentality still exists. It still is there. I remember, I was in Greece or something. I was at somebody's house and they had, was it Virginia Woolf's book? Wow, I don't know. But it was about women. And one of the lines, and I just picked up this book and I opened it. and what was on the page was how when we even have a preference in a partner, size, shape, skin color, hair color, boob size, everything, we are actually objectifying the other person completely. They actually went so far as to, it's going to come to me what the book was called soon, but she actually went so far as to call it a fetish. That if your partner must look a certain way, you have actually fetishized the other person because they have become an object in your mind. I am only turned on by people who are skinny. I am only turned on by people who are overweight. I am only turned on by tall people, short people. That actually makes the other person not a person. You're not connecting with a soul. You are simply objectifying the body in terms of sex, which was fascinating to me. Whatever, I just had never, I'd never heard anything like that. And it's taken a few years to digest it, but I think she's right. So I want to discern between the difference between boundaries and walls. A boundary is like a line in the sand. right? It's like a line. Here is my country. And inside my country, here are the rules of behavior. We must be kind to each other. We must respect each other. We must, do that kind of thing. And that's all it is. If you take a step inside of my world, this is what's expected. And if you don't do it, you're going to have to step back out. What's interesting about a boundary is in many ways, it's a training field for the person you're interacting with and you. It's primarily a training field for us, because this is our transition from this world where we don't actually exist as a person. We are simply an object in everyone else's life. We are the child of our parents. We are the partner of our partner. We are the sibling of that person. We are the employee of that boss. We are the constituent of this leader. We are a follower of this teacher. I am nothing. I am just an object in that person's game. They have the power. They define me. They tell me what I'm allowed to think. They tell me what I'm allowed to do. I don't exist. As we start to actually become a human, and so when I use the word sovereign, what I mean by that is when we look at our chakras, right? We have our crown chakra, our connection to the divine. And all the way down, I listen to the divine, I share, I am a heart-centered person. I have a self-identity in my third chakra. I interact with others, and in the first, I am incarnate on this earth. But I am incarnate on this earth as a reflection of this divine connection. This is my integration into the world, this vertical integration. This is who I am. This is where I get my guidance. This is what I mean by sovereign. There is no one above this. There is no other person around me who I get guidance from. This all comes from within my own energetic makeup. That's what I mean by sovereign. This is why all of us, everybody here today, we are all these interesting beings, all with our own connection upward. We're all connected. We're all connected. And we are all walking around parallel to each other. Nobody is here. Nobody tells us who we are, what we should do, what we should think, how we should act, nothing. Because we are each connected to God. This is why we're here. It's this connection. But when we've been raised that that's not the case, that this person owns you, I brought you into this world. I have expectations of how you must treat me. Oh, yes. Okay. No. Speaking as a parent, I was honored to get to bring children into this world. Many people don't get to. That's a real honor. I don't own them after that. That's like the most ridiculous concept. But this is what we were trained in. We were trained that these kids now owe us something and that they have to treat us a certain way regardless of how we treat them. This is nonsense. So the children then, after having this heavy-handed control, they must then find themselves and start creating this interesting circle of self around them when they actually start to realize, whoa, there's no one on top. It's just me. So then we start listening inside and we start thinking, well, what makes me different from them? What makes me different from that teacher? This is one of the reasons I believe that many spiritual gurus had to fall. Because people put the guru above them. They put the guru between them and God. And many gurus asked for this. They said, you cannot look to God. You have to have it interpreted by a guru, And then when the guru fell from whatever sexual scandal or something, this person's like, whoa, so I've got to connect with God myself and I have to listen myself. And then we start to figure out who we actually are. You start to develop this really interesting self-centered reality. And I don't mean this in a selfish thing. I mean self, like I exist. So what is my reality here on this planet? Well, inside, imagine a series of circles. In your very inner core, there's you. There's your soul. And maybe let's call this your most private self as well. This is the things that are just sort of between you and God. Maybe they're things that you don't want to share with others. There's this beautiful little place of sanctity and I've lost the word. Solitude. This very quiet space inside. And this is you. And you don't have to share that with anybody. That is generally just your experience of the world. And it's your private little book that no one else has to know. Not your partner, not your children, not your parents, nobody. It's just your private world. Then maybe you make a really good friend who's a really beautiful confidant. Then there's parts of you you might share with them that nobody else gets to know, but there's a little bit more that they get to know. Then maybe you have friends, like friends you hang out with, friends you do this with, friends you play ball with, friends you go watch movies with, friends you go out for dinner with. They get to know other things. And then there's sort of the public acquaintances, things like that, and that's what they know. So here's sort of your whole self, and the acquaintances get to know this stuff, friends know this stuff, confidants know this stuff, and then here's all the stuff that's just you. Right? We start to develop this. And in this deep silence in the middle, this is where we meditate. This is where we connect within. And nobody has a right to that space. So when we start developing this sense of self, this sense of inner connection, this is where boundaries start to be born. Because remember, before that, in the previous paradigm, you weren't allowed to have boundaries because you were basically owned by another person energetically. It's kind of like there was this weird king-slave mentality that we were just the slaves. We just had to do what we were told, and if we didn't do it, we were punished. So there was no such thing as a self-oriented or soul-oriented life, right? Because you simply were just, it's kind of that, if a parent expects this of you and you say, I'm not really feeling like doing it, and you get punished. I don't mean as a child or, we don't want to go there today, but say as adults, it's like, well, who are you to punish me? That doesn't make any sense, So what happens is we start to have to create boundaries. And we start to realize that there's parts of me that I don't really want to share with anybody. Here are the parts that I want to share with the ones I truly trust. Here's the friends. And then you go, oh, wait, you know what? Here's the boundary for you. This is as far as you're going to get. Maybe you have to kind of stay outside in the acquaintance zone because for whatever reason, you've shown me that I can't trust you with the other stuff. I don't want to share it with you. Maybe you shoot me down. Maybe you tell the whole world stuff and you don't understand privacy and you don't understand what it is to, be a safe space. So for you, here's the boundary of how much you're allowed into my life, right? And if you are kind and loving and we respect each other's journeys, then maybe that boundary moves in a little and maybe we start sharing other things together. That's cool. Or maybe the boundary moves in a little bit more because, wow, you know what? I'm really enjoying talking about these things with you. That's cool. Let's go in and continue. And maybe there is no one that ever hears that real inner core. Or maybe it does. Maybe that's not even necessary and you're an open book. Who knows? But the interesting thing about these boundaries is when people want in, they want deeper into you, but they aren't trustworthy in there. There's a reason that they are in the ring that they've been placed in, right? There's a reason. So if they've been placed in the acquaintance ring, and they could be family, They could be your partner. They could be colleagues. They could be neighbors. But for whatever reason, they're out in the acquaintance public ring. You can know this about me and this about me and this about me, but everything else is off limits. Well, if those people are like, well, I want to know more, or I want to have more control over your life, they will start to ask you probing questions. Well, what about this? And of course, we've been trained in the old paradigm, because we had no rights and we were simply energetically owned by others, that we had to answer any question asked of us. And if we didn't answer, what's the response? Oh, you got something to hide? Wow, it must be really bad if you don't want to share it with me. And it's like, no, you're just not privy to that information about me. This is my soul's journey on earth. It has nothing to do with anyone else. And in fact, I'd like to maintain some clarity about it. And if I include you in the process, it's just going to be confusing. I've told some of you guys that back in 1999, when I was sick and I had breast lumps and all that, I actually excluded my sisters from my journey, and we were really close. But because our mom had died of breast cancer a few years before that, I was really aware that and I wasn't accustomed to having this self-centered, soul-centered existence. I was accustomed to being everything for everybody. I was an open book, and I had no secrets, and everything was completely up for grabs. Just ask me a question and I'll answer everything, even if it kills me. And now you use it against me later, right? And it was really interesting that in that time, I felt really called to really make this circle very, very small, almost to the point that it was only me and God and Jim. But even Jim wouldn't allow himself. People who respect each other's boundaries, or who respect each other's soul's paths, would never ask to go in there. They want you to connect with God, with yourself, with your soul's path. They don't want to interfere, because they don't want to be interfered with. They are fully conscious of the great challenge it is to hear our truth, to hear our satya, to walk in our truth, how difficult it is to not be influenced by others. So when someone is truly walking their path, they will never encroach on you, because they know how hard this is. So when I was sick, even my husband, who was the greatest support, my mom, for him, was like his mom. She just wrapped him into her life, and he just felt so loved by her. She was just one of those amazing, loving people. And he was a very lovable guy, and so they just bonded like crazy. So losing her and being there through all of her illness and cancer and everything, it was so hard on him. He'd lost his mom too. And so then for me to end up with the exact same disease 4 years later, he was so frightened. Yet he watched me, and he came to my sessions with Jim, and he watched me cry and flail and battle against my own demons and my own structures and contracts and constructs inside of me. And he watched me battle, and he watched Jim kind of help me, through all of these old programs that kept me enslaved to everyone else. And he saw the difficulty. And so no matter what I was going through, he always gave me this beautiful space, this just beautiful space. Whatever you need, I'm here, and it was really lovely. And he had his own breakdown moments, right? Where he was just like, Cat, he called me Cat, and he was like, Cat, please go to the doctors. He had moments that he just absolutely lost it. I can't lose you kind of thing. But then I would know that I was sharing too much with him. That what I was going to him with, I needed to be going inside. I needed to be going to God with. I needed to actually be processing this elsewhere. It wasn't fair to him to process it with him. So it was really interesting to play with, who am I meant to be sharing this part of the journey with? And how does everybody fit in? And I wasn't cutting him out. I was just listening inside as to, even for me to set a boundary as to what I shared with people. It's very, very interesting. So as we walk through life, we have these boundaries with all these different people, and everybody belongs in a different ring, right? And it's okay. And it's not like, now I give you access to the friendship ring. It's not like that. People just naturally show up there for some reason. And we always know when someone's jumping in to a ring they don't belong, because we feel this pushback. Like energetically, we're like, I don't feel good about this. We need to honor that, because something's going on. And it's almost like, even if we don't have words, it is an old program that you're seeing. And if you don't have words, we just honor it, no matter what. And so back to the question of people probing you for answers, because they want inside, right? Not only do they want to know about you out of just gossipy curiosity, there's a lot of that, people not following their own paths. And it could come from a lot of things, right? Like sometimes I think of gossipy housewives. Where did the whole gossipy housewife thing come from, right? They weren't allowed to work. They had no rights. They had no freedoms. They had nothing to do. And it just became this weird, bad habit about talking about other people because they weren't allowed to follow their own paths, Or you picture, a not wealthy, like aristocrats, kind of the idle rich. They have nothing better to do because they're not actually expanding themselves, right? And so they just talk about other people. And then we watch movies about other people and we do all these things about other people. We get very focused on other people. So we end up thinking that we're allowed to know things about people that we don't offer. And then if we ask them the question, they'd better answer, or otherwise they're probably just hiding something, right? So some of it's just gossipy nonsense, right? Just nonsense. But sometimes it's actually out of a desire for control. Like people will ask you questions so that they can then give you their opinion on what you're doing, so they can influence your life for good or for ill, even if it's to throw you off your game. Many, many people unconsciously really like messing other people up. Like it's a little sick in that old world, right? So sometimes people ask these questions and they are probing and they are going to use it against you later. Or they're going to say, well, you know what? Here's what you should do. I have a friend, they just started this great diet. This is what you should do. And it makes people feel very powerful and intelligent if they can cast judgment on what you're doing. It's like, it's so stupid. Like it's so ridiculous, right? And so this is a very interesting thing when we actually allow ourselves to have our own journey with our own beautiful concentric circles of self and what we share with the world. And when someone starts asking you questions about your life, and you can kind of almost see it a mile away, that it's like, why would you want to know that? And if you dare tell them this much, and then they're suddenly like, here's what you should do. And then you kind of just watch it and you go, that's why you're asking. Got it. And then they kind of get pushed out to a further circle. And then after that, they ask questions and you kind of go, they're not really talking about that these days. And that's the interesting thing about people asking questions, is to find new scripts, find new ways of responding, because people are just badly trained, right? The interesting thing about enforcing boundaries is not only are we figuring out our circles. We're actually discovering ourselves, perhaps for the first time in our life. And while we're doing that, the great thing is other people are stepping in and pushing on our circles. So what is the blessing here? They're showing us ourselves. They're defining our circles for us. Like, it's so good. It's nothing to do with them. Every single thing we do on this planet is always about our own soul's journey. It's about us expanding. It's about us sorting ourselves out. So if people are encroaching on our circles, we kind of look at them and go, hey, you don't belong there. Interesting. I have a circle here, but now I can see it because somebody's pushed against it. Interesting. And then we develop a stronger sense of self and we go, interesting, right? So the people in our lives who we get to play with boundaries with, they're such blessings for us, like real blessings. So on the one hand, there's that part, that the boundaries help us define us. They really help us understand our soul's path. But they also help train the people that we actually really want to have in our lives. Like, as we're growing, these other people around us, maybe what in the family they grew up in, there were no boundaries allowed. So they were constantly encroaching on yours. But it isn't because they're rotten. It's they just don't know better. So as you develop healthy boundaries and enforce them with kindness, they also are learning, oh, you can say that? You can not answer a question? Oh, you can say no? You can choose to spend the weekend alone and not hang out with your friends? Really? Right? So the people we actually want to have in our lives, they can learn. They're learning while we're learning. So it's really cool, right? So boundaries are this very interesting, an arena for all of us to learn and grow. But then there's walls. When do we need walls? Well, we need walls when, one, there's no hope that the other person is learning. For whatever reason, no matter how many times we say something, a line in the sand isn't enough. They just walk over the line. And you say, I know, but here, see, when we have this is, and they just walk over, and they just walk over, and they just walk over. And for whatever reason, a line in the sand just doesn't work for them. We can't be rational. We can't just have a conversation. They're not going to figure it out. And unfortunately, for these people, we just have to put up a wall. And we just have to say, no. I know, but no. We already tried the line in the sand. We already tried communication. We already tried all these things. And for whatever reason, it's kind of like, a child who constantly is writing on the walls with markers. And, so you try all kinds of things. So, together we have consequences. So we have to wash the walls, and you don't get to play with your friends because you've got to wash the walls instead. And then you try this, and then you try that, and then you try this, and you try a million things, and it just doesn't work. No matter what, if there's markers, the child is going to write on the wall with markers. Well, at some point, you just take away the markers. And they might scream and yell and freak out and everything, and it's like, I'm sorry. Like, if learning is not part of this, then you don't get to play with markers, or you don't get to play with me, or whatever. And a wall is very, very healthy. It's a recognition of a situation, and it's okay. It's not a negative thing. It's not I'm being so judgmental, and I've got to be there for everyone, and all this stuff, right? So where do these walls? Where are they really needed? I think of a friend of mine. Her mother-in-law was an alcoholic. But my friend really wanted her to be a part of her life, right? She wanted her to be a part of her children's life, her grandkids, because we have these ideas that, well, my grandkids have to have a grandmother, and no matter what happens, no matter what grandma's like, I want her in their life no matter what. So for like 5-6 years, she tried and tried and tried, but the grandmother always showed up drunk, always, and then just a million things that happen when there's alcoholism. And eventually my friend just had to, and she had tried to talk to her and talk to her and talk to her and talk to her, and it just didn't work. And finally she just looked at the grandmother and said, "I'm sorry, but until you can come here completely sober, you're not allowed to come here." "Well, that's not right. Those are my grandkids." Wall. Like, if learning is not part of it, if we're not actually humans having a conversation and shifting and changing together, we don't play. And it's not mean. It's just reality, right? And what's interesting is they went 3 years without seeing the grandma. And then one day she showed up sober. And the children ended up having the most beautiful relationship with her. And so it's interesting, like it's almost like the walls, some people only respect a wall. Because for whatever reason, maybe it's karma, ancestral training in this lifetime, for whatever reason, boundaries don't exist. Everybody is their play toy. No one else matters, and they just steamroll in no matter what. And we don't have to hate them for it. We just have to be really clear as to how they exist in our lives, right? Back to the concept of objectifying, right? Sometimes a wall exists there. Ever since I became single, I would go through these phases of dating, right? And so I might go on a dating app or an online dating program or something like that. And it's always amazing, the people that come out, and they are 100% objectifying you, and they haven't even met you. like even just in the conversation, they're literally like, you don't even exist. They are just simply looking for a live sex doll to play with, and that's it. And you might try, but sometimes by the very things they say, you just sort of go, no. This is not, they're coming out of the gate objectifying you. And you just gonna go, bye-bye, right? And it's easy. It's okay. They'll find someone else. It's not up to us to do that. And there's a lot of things like this objectification is really important. So for example, in a lot of families, people are simply treated as objects. It's Christmas. It doesn't matter if we were mean and rude to you last Christmas. You must attend because that's what family does. And it's like, I'm not a player in your chess game. I'm not an inanimate object to appear so that you have a full set present. I'm a person. I am a divine being listening to my own guidance. And sometimes, you can have conversations. I definitely recommend conversations and trying to work it out and trying to make ways that we actually connect. But if that isn't possible, and that objectification of each other is so ingrained and so woven into almost the fabric of the family, the answer is just no. And so suddenly these concentric circles of what my life is all about, a wall goes up, and they no longer find out anything because that's just the way it is, right? And again, it's not a bad thing. It's just the way it is. And when that wall is in place long enough, and maybe we are the ones, maybe our soul is meant to put a wall up against a certain kind of energy. Maybe this is important for our own karmic path, our own ancestral patterns. Some people talk about ancestral patterns as some people come in as bloodline cleaners. That activity or behavior that has come down through the generations and been so normalized and so woven into the fabric of the family, but is actually very damaging and very cruel and very hurtful and really undermining the confidence of every person connected to it, that sometimes the role of the person is to say, it ends here, whatever that is. And you don't have to be angry at the parents or the grandparents. You just say, this behavior ends now. Not you as a person, but this behavior ends now. And that's it. The person is allowed in your life. The behavior isn't. The energy of that, whatever you want to call it, not allowed. There is a wall to that. If you choose to not bring that, you are always welcome. It's very important. This is not negative. This is very, very important. It's powerful for us, and it's very important for that person. Because many people do not learn until they hit a wall. And so it's almost like giving someone the last shred of faith that maybe they might turn a corner if they hit a wall with you. You know? And then there's things that, along the same line is real cruelty. There are people in the world, and we don't need to label them or anything like that, but the behavior is cruel. Whether it's emotional, mental, physical, sexual, whatever, it's cruel. And we don't need to allow that behavior either. And we can say, wall. And if it happens again, the wall gets bigger. If it happens again, the wall gets bigger until they can't find you at all. And there's something, it's not just physically in the world, but even energetically. We put up the wall and say no. And what that also means is we put the wall up and we don't allow the thoughts in our head either. We're not going to hide behind the wall and then argue with them in our brain. Right? Like you actually have to, this is what I mean. It's not just a wall about them. It's us. It's us changing perhaps a generational pattern of cruelty. We do it. And that includes everything in our mind. All of that also belongs on the other side of the wall. Very, very important clarity, especially in this time, especially as we're shifting out of this old paradigm. The other piece is this interesting question of control. People who want to control you. It's a huge deal. This control factor, it links in with the objectifying thing, right? But objectifying can be anything. It can be sexual. It can be my partner has to act and look a certain way. It can be that my children have to, look right to society and go to the right schools and have the right job and marry the right person and be the right, whatever. All objectification. We're not actually looking at that child. We're 100% just objectifying them. So that's objectifying. Control can take a whole other thing. When someone actually wants to control you, they actually, for whatever reason, they're not climbing their own mountain. They maybe think they're already at the top of their mountain. They kind of think they're king of the castle. And now they will tell everyone else what to do. That's a huge thing. And, it's hard to kick a king off their castle. So oftentimes when someone just simply wants to control you, there's nothing to do but put up a wall. Like because it just doesn't matter. You can talk and talk and talk and talk and do all the things in the world. And they're just like, and you're just kind of like, okay, enough now. That's enough. In the old words, you're not the boss of me. And you're not. Nobody's the boss of anybody. So it's just a very interesting thing to look at people. And again, it's really important that walls keep out bad behavior. The soul is just the soul. Who knows why that soul came in the personality they did and all that. You don't have to not love the soul. But as long as the behavior's there, it's kind of like if someone came into my apartment and every time they came in, they picked up a chair and threw it out the window and broke the window. I'd be like, stop breaking the window. And they're like, well, it's just, I can't even control myself. And it's like, well, then you're not allowed in my house. Well, that's not fair. Yeah, it is. You're not allowed to throw chairs through my window, or you're not allowed in my house. This isn't judgment. It's just reality, you know? So, just to finish off our talk, so then what does actual connection and healthy human interaction look like? Well, we know when we actually are clear about ourselves, we're on our journey, we're walking, we're expanding, we're having dark nights of the soul, we're meditating, we're doing all these things as we listen for guidance, and we're walking along our path, and it's so interesting. And then every so often somebody pops up when we go, well, you're interesting. We seem to be talking about the same things. Awesome. Let's keep walking. This is great. Oh, our paths have diverged. Awesome. And off we go. And then I continue on my path and I keep going. We simply interact with people who, for some reason, are resonating with us on our path. We're not controlling anybody. The best thing I could do for my children is walk my path. That is the best thing. If I want to influence my children in any way, which I don't, well, if I wanted to influence my children in any way, all I would want for them is to be happy and really feel that their soul is on their real path. And the only way for me to influence them in that way is for me to do that. Right? And then to have complete faith that they're listening too. They have the same beautiful, sovereign, vertical alignment that I do. The best I can do is just live by example, right? That's the best I can do. So if there's anyone in the world I would want to influence, it would be my children. Everybody else, friends, parents, colleagues, bosses, employees, why in the world would we want to control anybody? You know, in my book, Tantric Intimacy, it was really interesting writing it because I thought it was supposed to just sort of be about Tantra. But in the teaching and the working with couples and teaching people over the years before, especially before I wrote the book, I realized that there were certain things that, like a missing piece, you know, when there's a piece missing, and no matter how much you teach and no matter how much you share, people aren't getting it for some reason, or they're missing it. They've got all the bits, but something's not working. And so it was so interesting when I was writing the book and this whole topic of love came up. And at the beginning of the teaching had to be agape. And agape is, you know, in the ancient Greek, it meant God's love for mankind. But in many ways, it's us observing each other through the eyes of God, or through the eyes of someone who truly loves this other person. And inherent in agape is respect and the understanding that every single soul here is on a path. And that's it. Nobody knows what we can't look at another person and go, well, you know what would be better for them? That's impossible. It doesn't matter who you are. Nobody knows what's better for another person. This is agape, that no matter what, I respect you, I respect your journey. Awesome. And then these boundaries and walls are simply functions of how close we are or how interwoven our lives are, right? It's not everybody has choice, but we really, really have to have this lovely respect for each other. And then all these boundaries and walls aren't even needed, you know. So thank you so much for being here. I hope you have an amazing day, and we'll see you soon.